In our Torah reading cycle, we've come to the last portion of the book of Exodus. It's called Pekudei. It's a funny name for the portion. It's connected to the first sentence of the portion, which says, Eleh Pekudei HaMishkan. These are the accountings of the Mishkan, the mobile sanctuary or the tabernacle that the people of Israel created in the desert. This word is connected to the word pakad, and pakad has multiple meanings. It can mean to take account of, to give heed to pay attention. Now, after the grand story of the Exodus, starting with Moses as a baby and leading to the slavery in Egypt and the 10 plagues, culminating in the Exodus and the giving of the 10 commandments, this book of Exodus moves into a different theme, and the last third of the book of Exodus is all about the design, the construction, and the ornamentation of the Mishkan. It seems strange that after a really good story, the book of Exodus finishes on this rather obscure, highly ritualized, and long forgotten desert object. But there seems to be method in the madness. Because if you read Genesis and Exodus together, we can see a pattern emerging. Genesis, Bereshit, starts with the design, construction, and implementation of creation and humanity. It then proceeds from Genesis chapter 12 to tell the story of one family, from Abraham and Sarah down 10 generations all the way to Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. And after that story is done, Exodus concludes with the construction project of the Mishkan. It's as if the beginning of Genesis, in which God builds a world, and the end of Exodus, in which Moses builds a sanctuary for God to dwell. And these bookend a story in the middle about an Israelite family and all the people and their developing covenant with God as a holy people. There seems to be a deep connection between God's creation of the world on the one hand and the Israelite construction of the Mishkan on the other. The literary links between the creation story and the Mishkan are abundant and striking. For instance, immediately after God looks and sees the world, God says, "Ki tov," it is good. Genesis tells us then that the heaven and the earth were finished, and the Sabbath is inaugurated. Similarly, at the end of the book of Exodus, when the Mishkan is completed, Exodus, the book, looks at the work of the tabernacle and says, "It is good," and all is completed, followed by a description of the Sabbath. The point is clear. The Torah text wants us to know that God's creation of the world and Moses' construction of the Mishkan, the place where we meet God on earth, are intertwined in a highly significant way. Except that the reality of the world we build falls far short of what God hopes and expects of us. Instead of a world where human dignity is real, we live in a world in which barbarism and cruelty rule the day. We live in a world where God seems all too utterly absent. The building of the Mishkan represents an environment in which God's will should pervade. But because it doesn't, Judaism doesn't rest content with one Mishkan, but rather we are commanded to keep this idea of building an ongoing, never-ending project, to build a larger Mishkan for all, a place in which God's presence is felt for everyone. So this week, when we look at the events on our own streets, we may feel dismayed, even shocked, that the deportation of a student from one of our universities, Tufts, becomes a shocking and disturbing element of how this administration is operating. We see a young woman who, under the laws of free speech, is allowed to speak freely about her opinions. We may not agree with her, but we have a responsibility to ensure that what she says will not be at risk to her very self and her opportunity to study and to learn in her program. We have to remember that she has not been charged with a crime and that she was not put before a judge or any court before being sent to Louisiana, where she is in limbo along with others who have been detained. Now we know, and we Jews know especially, that the safety of all of us in the United States depends on constitutional democracy and the protection of minorities. This includes the foundational First Amendment right to free speech. And that must exist regardless of our personal opinion about the content of that speech, as long as it is not inciting hatred or fear in others. So this anti-democratic assault on Muslims and Arabs and immigrants will lead all of us, including Jewish Americans, to feel less safe. If we are going to construct a Mishkan, reflective of the world that God wishes to create for us, we're going to have to stand up and work hard for justice and protection in order to defend our rights and our laws. Tragically, the way in which democracy dies is when others abandon their principles in order to be swayed by the bullying and the threatening that is put before them. This was the beginning of the end of democracy and a free press in Germany in the 1930s, when law firms, universities, corporations gave in to those who would put them in their place. And as good Jews know, it just takes good people to be silent for evil to flourish. Our Torah portion states, Ela Pikudei HaMishkan. These are the accounts. This is the tally of the Mishkan. This is the way in which we will be counted. We will be counted by the Mishkan that we build, by the promises that we fulfill, of the very values that Moses and Judaism has taught us. A place on this earth that represents the divine, a place where we will all be protected. And just as God has built a world for us, we now have to build a world of justice and protection so that there is a hope for all. Amen.